Welcome to the Science of Parenting podcast, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator.
I'm Courtney. I am a person in long-term recovery. I have two beautiful children, 3 and 13, or 2 and 13. And I'm also a peer recovery coach at Christ Recovery Community Center and a parent partner for Children and Families of Iowa.
All right, you're doing all the cool things. You just got all the cool things to say in your introduction.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Sometimes I forget.
Well, you said it all. You did great.
Thanks.
So back for episode 3 of this season where we're talking about parenting through challenges. And Courtney and I, when we were talking through this script and outline, she's like, Mackenzie, you did not warn me about today. And I was like, well, because our topic for today is kind of heavy, I'll be honest. We're talking about parenting. So, right, the title being Parenting Amid Threats to Safety, and whether that's threats to your safety and or your child's safety. And I think, on the podcast, we've so often talked about like just stress. And a lot of time it's like this normative, like getting our kids to activities or just like tantrums, like these normative things that happen. And like, sometimes there's more, right? Some families experience more than just like those normative kind of daily stressors. And so we do want to talk about how do you parent when there are like legitimate threats to your safety. So a few examples, right? This could be domestic violence. This could be related to substance use or dangerous neighborhoods or bullying, access to dangerous things nearby, or even just like prior exposure to violence, even in your childhood, and how that trauma can like create, when that trauma comes back up, I guess I should say, can create threats to safety. And so we know that not all listeners will have this experience, and we think it's an incredibly important topic.
So, if you are a parent who is parenting or has parented in dangerous circumstances, we want you to know that we see you and you are doing your best to raise your child. Our mission on today's episode is to offer practical strategies to help you on your parenting journey now.
hmm And if you're a person or a parent who does not have these kinds of experiences in your life, we hope that you will listen to learn more about other parents' experiences and that you'll possibly find some ways to support or assist other families who are experiencing these challenges. So we're just going to dive right in.
Okay, I'm
so,
ready.
you're like, okay, here she goes. But, we're laughing, but, it is a serious thing. But it's important, we're acknowledging that for some of our listeners, you're like, yeah, I know threats to safety. I live it on the daily, or I grew up in it. And so it can be scary and oftentimes not talked about, right? And I mean, even guilty, right? We have 12 seasons, or this is our 12th season of the podcast. And so often we're talking about, like I said, like those normative, like the normal kind of everyday stress, and not talking about this kind of bigger picture stuff because not everybody experiences it. And it's important for us to like, how do I, yeah, it's nice for you to give me strategies for a tantrum, but like, what do I do when my kid is literally like unsafe at home? What does parenting look like in the middle of that? So I guess that's kind of where I want to start. So, I'm all about the like research and reality of things. And right. So I've been digging in the research naturally, like the nerd that I am. But Courtney, one of the reasons you're here with us is because you are like an expert and you have like lived experience in a lot of these things. And you've been so gracious to be so vulnerable with us and sharing kind of your experiences. So, I mean, yeah, we just want to start by talking about reality. Like, what's it like to be parenting in dangerous circumstances?
Yeah. So I will start off saying I'm completely grateful for everything I have experienced in life. Was it a choice? Yes, but I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned.
Mhm.
One of my biggest realities I had to come to at a very young age is that I did have an unsafe environment, and raising a
Mhm.
child as I'm a child was an unsafe experience itself. Um, so when my daughter was 6 months old, her dad and I got into a little dispute,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
it ended up, and pretty much initially ended up as DHS got involved, and I
Okay.
had to hand over my beautiful 6-month baby girl at the age of 19 to DHS. It was a
Mm,
lot of fear driven on both sides. I'm
yeah.
grateful for DHS stepping in and doing the things that I could not do for myself, and that was get out of that situation. Um,
Mm,
when you're a young mom and you have these challenges, they could be a huge life changing experience. You can either go on and do better things, or you can keep doing in the same situation. And in my
mm,
case, at a very young age, I was just trying to do what I thought was right. And so
yeah.
when your baby's covered in your own blood, and you're like, "Hey, what do I do here?" My only choice, and well, not my only choice, but one of the biggest choices I ever made was to go ahead and just give temporary custody to my grandma, and to have DHS involved. Without them, I have no idea what would have happened. But at the time, that was my safe experience. That was my only way to safety, and
Mm,
it was a huge decision. But I'm glad I've went through it and I've learned.
yeah. Well, and okay, so I want to highlight some of the things I heard you say in that. So one, you were a teen mom, right? And that in itself, right? Learning how to parent and all of those things in that situation. You were in domestic violence. You were experiencing domestic violence
Yeah,
while you're yeah, like while you're caring for your 6 month old. And yeah, then having law enforcement and DHS involved in the situation. And yeah, so how do you make I mean, this is rhetorical. Yeah, like how you make that those decisions to like keep your child safe and yeah,
yeah.
ideally keeping you safe, right? That's like what we would have wanted out of that situation, but it does that sounds like an incredibly difficult decision.
Yeah,
Can I
and
ask like yeah, what are you said fear kind of drove part of that. Can you tell me more about what you mean?
yeah, so being a baby or a child or an adolescent who was exposed to the system at a very young age, I kind of already like
Mm,
my thoughts of what happens when DHS gets involved in a child's life was just unrealistic. But again, it was my mom's reality, my reality. So
mhm.
I was
So
like, oh
your
no,
lived experience as a child who had been involved
yeah.
with DHS and okay, yeah.
Was a huge like, "Oh my goodness, do I have a choice? Like, what happens next?" But then I'm
Mhm.
looking at the big picture at 19 years old, newly out of high school with a child. Well, no, I was 18. I was 18 because I hadn't even turned 19 yet.
Yeah.
Um, when I just wanted to have a family. This is what I thought it looked like. This is what I thought happened. Like,
Mm,
now I know why my mom didn't get out of her domestic situation. Like everything
mhm.
that I was taught had really played a huge role into that decision. And at the end of the day, I might have not have been happy about it, but I look back now and I'm like, thank goodness. Like,
Mhm.
because at the time DHS was the only safe place
Yeah.
in my grandparents that I had.
Yes, and that well, yeah, to make an incredibly I mean, I literally I don't wanna say I can imagine, like, but to make it an like, an impossible decision about I had this experience and it was really hard for me when I was a like, yeah, when I was involved with DHS when I was a child, and
Yeah.
then, to I either have to choose that or choose this situation, which is also unsafe for my baby.
And I think what was important with at that time in my life, I had to realize that I was not the safest person for her to be around either.
Mm, yeah.
Um, I hadn't gotten to substances at that point in time in my life. I hadn't like done
Mhm,
anything super detrimental to my health or my
mhm.
well-being, but just being in that relationship was. Um,
Unsafe.
yeah, and
Mhm.
I knew the safest way for me to be able to leave that situation was not to have to worry. And I don't want to say like, hey, I didn't want the responsibility of caring for her in that
No.
time, but at the time, at a young age, it was easier for me to address the situation, move out on my own versus having to do it with a baby.
Yes.
And for
Yeah.
me, it it was just I did not like it. I had a lot of
Oh,
fight
yeah.
to it,
Yeah.
but when that case ended, I was like in my own
Mhm.
home. I had the support of DHS. I had my grandma and grandpa full support, and it
Mhm.
was just like such a good experience. It wasn't a great experience, but it was a good experience to learn
Yeah.
from. I
Yeah,
believe.
and at the end of it and that well, honestly, part of what I hear in your story is the well, you even though the situation was, like, far from ideal, right, understatement, far from ideal that you found ways to, like, protect your child, and even though a lot of people are like I'm like, "And parent your child," right? Even though it wasn't, like, in having your child in your custody, that you were being her parent and caring for her by protecting her from this dangerous situation.
Yeah. And without that experience, I wouldn't have been able to be signed on as a parent partner. So again,
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
have to look at everything in like a huge picture. Like, hey, if I had not experienced this, I wouldn't be able to share my experience with other women who are experiencing the same issues,
Hmm.
go living that fear driven of a domestic abuse situation,
Yeah.
and suffering. So I share openly, um, just so other people don't have to feel so alone.
Yeah. And like thank you again for being willing to share your story and vulnerably of this kind of experience. And yeah, you're a survivor, and you're a parent, and all of those things were coexisting, like they were happening at the same time. And that's exactly what I hope we can kind of speak to in this episode in particular of, yeah, it's not like we parenting is not happening in a bubble, right? Like it's
No.
happening amid these other things. And so one of the strategies for kind of this episode is this idea called harm reduction. And that's part of like what I hear in your story is, so harm reduction is defined as related to a substance use disorder. Harm reduction is a set of practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with drug use. Okay, so when we're talking about it in the scope of substance use disorder, that's the definition. I want us to consider this concept of harm reduction specifically for parenting. So that little at the end where it was like the negative consequences associated with drug use, I want us to just kind of think like associated with blank. Like you can fill in the blank. So the negative consequences that might be associated with abuse, with
Yes.
a dangerous neighborhood, with access to substances in the home, or right, whatever that might be. But it's strategies for reducing the negative consequences associated with whatever that dangerous thing might be. And so ideally we would always be in a situation where we can always provide like the safe, stable environment and can always provide for what our kids need, and that like there's lots of us not living in the ideal. So that's just not always the reality. So here comes harm reduction, an opportunity for, okay, it's not the ideal, but how can I reduce the negative consequence? That's what I want us to focus on. Sometimes we can change the situation. Um, Often it's not as simple as just like, yeah, I'll just change it, right? Like you were talking about, it wasn't as simple as just like get up and leave. Far more complex. And so when we are in these cases, let's focus on reducing harm. So you actually have another scenario that you had talked about. You talked about giving birth during COVID, right?
Yeah.
And how you practiced harm reduction in that. So can you like give us that
Yeah.
example?
Yeah. So I got pregnant in December of 2019. So that means my whole entire pregnancy experience was
Hmm.
through the whole entire COVID pandemic. Um, Giving birth to Liam in August, right in the midst, kind of the heat of the pandemic, was a really, especially just being 6 months clean again,
Yes, you're still fairly new in your recovery. Hmm.
was an experience. I laugh because that's my way to cope with things, and not that I'm like laughing at, but I have to laugh at myself a little bit. So
Yeah.
during that, I had to lower my expectations of like, hey, I don't have this beautiful, elaborate like birth and
Mm.
all this, great things, because actually it was a harm reduction in place to make sure that COVID wasn't spread inside the hospitals. Um,
Yes.
I wasn't able to have the skin to skin directly out of birth. They took it, they did a lot of the, preventative COVID
Yes.
procedures, masks in the hospital during labor and delivery, no visitors. It was an experience. And then leaving the hospitals, I had to promise or agree with the pediatrician that Liam wouldn't have any human interaction that
Mhm.
wasn't inside the house for 72 hours.
Yes.
Just to ensure that the safety. So me setting boundaries with family who I for some reason felt weird giving boundaries to, given the
Mm.
circumstances of my situation. I had to have them wear masks, wash their hands, no touching or holding. Public
Mhm.
was a huge thing.
Yes.
The whole "Hey, I'm a baby, don't touch me" sign that was on the car seat that they had.
Mhm.
That was me. You know,
Mhm.
it was just very, so the harm reduction there was limiting everybody who I let in my personal space.
Yes.
And so I wanted to show off this beautiful, healthy baby I just gave birth to, but it just wasn't that simple. It was a lot of continuous preventative care, a lot of prevention when it came to outside exposure.
Yes.
Masks were hard to come by. They were fairly expensive in August of 2020.
Yes, and in short supply.
in short supply. So
Mhm.
I made do with what I had, the cloth masks really were kind of a huge, maybe they weren't the best, but they gave me peace of mind and they
They were
left.
harm reduction.
Yep, they created a barrier between your cough or your spit or
Mm.
anything next to my little baby, and so yeah,
Yeah.
it was interesting to have, and it was interesting that whole rest of the year, really.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of, "Don't touch him, don't touch my baby. I
Yes.
love you, don't
Well,
touch my
and
baby."
right, and so as we think about threats to safety, especially for a newborn, COVID was a threat to safety, right,
And
of
then
a
you can't
newborn
even
baby.
see. You couldn't even see, like, COVID. Like, that was, like, the
Yes.
crazy thing, like, "Oh, no, is it on that surface?" Like, no, it's
Mhm.
in the air, you can't go outside, it was very
Yes, like an abstract threat. Yes. And so, yeah, the ideal would have been like, yes, ideally, I wouldn't have had this threat to my child's safety, and that wasn't the case. And
that
so you
nobody
had
could
to find
control. Nobody
yes.
could control it.
Yes.
And then coming out of active addiction, it's like, like, I just did the best I could. A lot
Yes.
of a lot of not anybody touching him
Mhm.
was
And
a
that
thing.
was how you reduced the potential harm, right? That's the
Yeah.
exact definition is strategies aimed at reducing the potential consequences associated with COVID. Right? And so I'll give another example that actually is a really basically universally taught parenting strategy. I'm fairly certain we've said it at least once before in one of our podcast episodes. But this idea of if you're feeling overwhelmed when caring for your baby, that it's better to set the baby down, right? Like if you're overwhelmed and not sure you can like regulate and get it together, better to set your baby down than like potentially risk hurting them.
Yeah.
And that's harm reduction, right? So ideally, I'm always regulated and can always respond to my baby's cry and soothe them. Like I that's ideal.
I'm glad you
That
can.
was often not my ideal. Right? And so my harm reduction in that and that we teach to basically all parents now is if we're overwhelmed or out of sorts or yeah, not in control of our emotions, the harm reduction is that it's safer to set them down so that I don't accidentally hurt them. And so yep, not ideal maybe that my baby had to cry for a few minutes unattended and unsoothed, and it was less harmful than if I would end up hurting them. And
Absolutely.
so there is a lot of harm reduction in parenting. Actually, a lot of the parenting education we do, we are teaching not to the ideal. Like in the reality of these moments, it's okay for us to say good enough, right? It
Yeah.
was that is good enough parenting to not hurt my child because I'm overwhelmed. And so thinking about, yeah, this idea of harm reduction amid whatever threat to safety a family might be experiencing, right? Like domestic violence or, we even talk about like living in a dangerous neighborhood. If you live somewhere where there's maybe like gang violence or a lot of crime or just violence in general, that harm reduction, right? Ideally, you would live somewhere that's safe. That might be changing that is not as simple as it might sound.
No.
And so maybe your harm reduction is not letting your child play outside in your yard. Um, and it's not ideal and it reduces the potential negative consequences of something. So I just thought this idea of harm reduction was really important. As we think about threats to safety, it'd be great if we could always know that the environment's safe, but that's just not always going to be the case.
So harm and unsafe situations happen even in the best of places.
Mhm.
So the best harm reduction strategy I can come up with is just to be vigilant. Make sure you're monitoring.
Yeah.
It's that piece of harm reduction that I think we all use and don't think that we really have. That's
Yes.
yeah.
That monitoring, right? That's like a term I use all the time. I love the idea of like, right, we have to monitor our children. But I even think like I could literally have every baby proofing product ever produced, and I feel like there's so many. But you could have like every single one and your child could still get hurt, right? And so and that just like it just happens. Yeah, as vigilant as you might be, but we'll do our best to monitor. And yeah, that's harm reduction.
Yeah.
That in itself,
Some people do harm reduction, they don't even know what it is.
right? How do we reduce the likelihood of like negative consequences? And so
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it is small things like my child getting a bump on the head, but right, the of course like the darker, uglier side of not having any kind of baby proofing, right, on a small scale, right? Like child injury is actually one of the leading causes of death for children.
Yeah.
And so that is a huge potential negative consequence. So that's harm reduction, our
Yeah.
monitoring, our, yeah, thinking of like baby proofing our parenting sometimes. What are like
Yeah.
the guardrails, if you will, right? I've got a baby gate in my house still, and my kids are not babies anymore. um, but that is, well, yeah. What are the baby gates? What do we, whatever our situation is,
Yeah.
how can we kind of protect some guardrails around it?
And I
So,
think it's healthy to have those parenting guardrails, those baby
mhm,
proofed things in our teaching of being parents or our journey, or even with this kid to that kid. You
yeah.
know, you have to learn how to protect yourself and your emotions and protect your babies essentially too.
hmm And yeah, that, and what I may be worried about protecting my children from might be different than yours, right? And that could
Yeah.
be based on our lived experience, on our values, whatever it is. And right, but that's, I mean, we go back to our beliefs. Like we believe every parent is an expert on their own kids. Um, and so that we find ways to help protect them from negative consequences. And it's
Absolutely.
okay to say, you know, it's not ideal, but it's good enough. Okay, so this episode, right, we're coming in, you came to listen and you're like, "Hey, this is a little heavy, y'all." But the actually something literally called hope, like the framework we're going to talk about is called hope. So, amid thinking about threats to safety and harm reduction as a potential parenting strategy if you are in an unsafe situation, there's this research. It's actually related to ACEs, which is an acronym that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, typically kind of in the realms of like neglect or abuse or like household like dysfunction is actually what they call it, but like violence is an example. So there's this framework, like I said, called hope, and the research is showing certain positive experiences can basically help counteract the potential negative consequences from that kind of childhood trauma. So there's four things in the hope framework that are key experiences that can help break the cycle of trauma for future generations. So four things. One is positive relationships. Two, safe and stable environments. Three, engagement, kind of that feeling you matter, but also opportunities to develop social and emotional intelligence. Okay, so we'll like dig into these four, but basically, these are four things that are key positive experiences that can help counteract negative adverse childhood experiences.
It only takes one consistent, caring adult to change the outcome. So even though you don't have to have them all, it's kind of a fluid thing. You gain some, you learn more, but it takes one consistent, caring parent to change the outcome of these.
Mm-hmm. And so Courtney and I, like, we've been like texting a little bit between episodes and stuff when we record. And she texted me the other day and she's like, Mackenzie, I'm learning this stuff. And it's kind of like what we talked about on the podcast. And so that idea, right? That was like one of your takeaways from the stuff you've been learning. And I
Yeah.
think that's so powerful and so relevant here, right? As we think about, you know what? Yeah, ideally we'd live in a safer neighborhood, or ideally I wouldn't be in active addiction, or ideally
Yeah.
there wouldn't be violence near us. But that we can say, yeah, I can help build positive relationships, like helping my child find that one consistent, caring, positive adult can help change their life. And that these four things, right? And one of them is relationships, that these four things can help counteract it.
And I think it takes a real big parent, or a big parent, like a real, what I want to say,
Mature,
mature parent, to say, you
humble.
know what, hey, it's okay, I'm not these right now.
Mhm.
Um, and take a break. Like, and I'm referring back to when my 6 month old daughter was had to be intervened.
Mhm.
Um, it was okay
Mhm.
that I wasn't all four of these for her, but as long as I'm building towards these four in the future and I can gain and gain and gain, you know, it's okay.
Yes.
Everyone's successful looks different.
And that yeah, you were practicing that harm reduction, and
Mhm.
that in the process of that, right, your child, hopefully was with
That
someone
one,
that could be in that, right, caring, consistent adult category, and
and
that
then
that was beneficial to her in a different
absolutely,
way than what you could offer.
yeah.
Yeah. And
I
yeah, I don't
always say,
there's a lot of words there. I'm like the mature parent, the humble parent, the intelligent, oh, there's a lot.
yeah.
You always say what? You started to say something, I interrupted you.
Oh, I always say, like, when everyone's like, "Oh, Lexi, she's such a good kid, like, she's so responsible," and I was like, "I honestly didn't do any of that." You know, my grandma and grandpa really stepped up to
Mm,
the plate, and,
yeah.
they made her that mature, responsible, really kind hearted human being. I have
Mhm,
made a played a little part of it with the neglect part,
mhm,
but in our experience, but, thankfully, I had the other caring, loving, consistent parent and person
mhm.
and adult that helped me when I was unable to. So,
Yes,
for
yes,
that, I'm
helped
really
you, helped
thankful.
your yeah, helped you and helped your child, and
Yeah,
I say and, I feel like I'm like, you're sharing things that I'm like, "Oh, there's such good fit lead into the rest of the season."
yeah,
Yeah, there's a reason Courtney's here, y'all. She's got good stuff to share. But I do wanna go back to this hope framework and some of the 4 things. So, right, relationships, one of them is about, like, yeah, that whole caring, consistent adult, and so it talks about relationships with parents, but also with peers, right, like their friends, and yeah, family members. So positive relationships, again, caring, consistent adults. There's also environments, right? And so having like a safe, a stable place to live, learn, and play. So having a safe environment, those things can help counteract those negative experiences. Engagement. So, how do we create feelings that our child matters, right? That they can believe that they matter to the people around them and matter to their community or matter to, yeah, their child care or whatever that group could be a part of. And then finally, opportunities where kids can develop their social and emotional intelligence, so, particularly when they get to like play and interact with peers. So, I do want to say, right, there's 4 things. And I even think of like in the examples we've talked about, before you might, as a listener, if you are parenting amid some kind of threat to your safety, before you like shame spiral around one of them, like, gosh, I don't provide that, or I haven't been, or there was a time in the past where I really wasn't providing that very well. I want us to like pause and like reflect and feel that. Like, okay, you can recognize that. And these are not like get all 4 and check all the boxes, and that's what's the only option, right?
no,
Even if you're like, "You know what? One of the ways I can help my child," like you were talking about, Courtney, was like there was a different consistent caring adult, and that helped my child.
yeah,
Right? Or she was in an environment that was safe and stable in a way that your environment wasn't at the time. And so even
and
if it's not all 4, you can say like, "You know what? Even if I'm not doing this like some of these other things, or that's not the thing I can provide right now, look, I am helping them get opportunities to learn and play with their peers. That's beneficial."
yeah.
Right?
And
Mhm.
I don't think you have to hit all four every day either. Like Mackenzie said,
No.
it's not a checkbox. Like, oh, I had relationship. Oh, I had good environment. No, I think it's a super huge picture. Some of us hit on them, some of us don't. Some days this gets met, some days that don't get met. And that's okay. That's what
Mhm.
we covered in the last podcast was the good enough parenting piece.
Mhm.
Just as long as we try to strive to every day hit one of these marks, I think is a win.
Mhm.
Sometimes I don't, but as long as I hit one of them,
Mhm.
then I'm still winning. I'm still successful.
Right.
I'm still a good parent.
Mhm, right, and we're working again on this, like, the lifelong perspective of it, right?
Yeah.
Of, like, over time, and yeah, there might be times when certain of these aren't maybe going so well, right? Thinking about, like, living in an unsafe neighborhood where there's a lot of violence, or in your home, right? If there's domestic violence in your home, then yeah, you're probably not gonna say, "Yeah, the safe, stable environment we're providing." But the cool thing about, this HOPE framework was when your reality is that there are components of your life or aspects of your life that are threat to your safety and or your child's, it's often like, well, what can I do? Right? Like, what do I even do? And I thought, like, okay, here are 4 things we can do. Even if you can't get all 4, you have ideas to pick from, if you will. Like, all right, so the environment isn't our strength right now, but even though my child is maybe experiencing some harm and trauma from what's going on, not ideal, but I can still have a positive relationship with them, right? I will work to provide that part, or I will work to provide interactions with other adults, even if I'm not
Yeah.
the one who can provide the stability right now. So I think that's really important for us to, make sure that we touch on. So the goal is not shame of like, get these 4. The goal is when you are living the less than ideal, when you're parenting amid threats to safety, here are things, even if you can't control all 4, here are some options of I can't maybe get my child out of this unsafe situation, but I can find some of these things.
Yeah.
So, our strategy that I wanted to touch on today, it's a little different than what we usually do. But as we think about how we care for ourselves and our child, like, yeah, and our children when there is danger, we wanted to share a resource of just hotlines, right? So places that you can call that you can get resources or, learn or even just talk and process whatever, kind of the threat to safety that you're experiencing. And so one I want to share actually is from Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and that is the Iowa Concern Hotline. It's available 24/7. And so, calling this could be even related to like financial questions, farm questions, stress questions related to your mental health. But that is, again, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that number is 1-800-447-1985. So that is the Iowa Concern Hotline. Another one, an important hotline we wanted to shout out was the Your Life Iowa hotline. And so this one you can actually call or text, which I think is great. I know sometimes calling on the phone feels a little overwhelming. A text can feel a little less scary to do. And so also there are some situations where you literally maybe can't talk on the phone, right? And so it's important to have that text option available. So for calling, that's 855-581-8111. And for text, it is 855-895-8398. So that is Your Life Iowa. Those are just two that are kind of specific to Iowa that we're sharing. We know that some of our listeners are not here in Iowa, and hopefully, that your state has some resources you can access. But we also wanted to share a website, which we will link in our podcast description of this episode. Kind of a website with a link to lots of national hotlines. So this is from the American Psychological Association, the webpage we're linking to, and it lists a wide variety of available hotlines nationally, from Gamblers Anonymous to domestic violence to suicide prevention, or people in crisis with suicidal ideation. And so there is a lot of resources. We hope those continue to grow, but that hotlines are an option for a potential resource for you when there are threats to your safety. So thanks for letting me give that little commercial, Courtney.
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like, because you think like nobody ever really knows like how do I vent? Who do I call? And not a lot of people think like, hey, I'm going to call this hotline. Like, they're there to be utilized.
Mm-hmm. Well, and sometimes we don't even know that there is like a hotline for a specific thing we're
Yeah.
experiencing. And so that there's hotlines for human trafficking, and there's hotlines for Narcotics Anonymous, and there's a lot of different places that we can call. So that's kind of our strategy for today, is if you are parenting amid a threat to safety, that there are resources that can hopefully help you. So this now brings us to our stop, breathe, talk moment of the podcast episode, where our producer Mackenzie comes in, asks us a question about our episode. So what do you got for us today, Kens?
Hello. So, you all talked a lot about how in that hope framework, you don't have to be, we don't have to be perfect. I think that's always the thing, right? It's like we don't have to be perfect. We don't have to get it all right.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we're working on one thing. So, my question for you all, actually, I have to side note, when you keep saying the hope framework, I want it to be like H is something, O is something. It's not that.
Oh, like an acronym? I know. I thought the same thing.
But anyway, so the 4 pieces of hope are not HOPE. They are REO. So REO, it's actually the REO framework. Relationships, environments, engagement, and then that opportunities for social emotional. So really could be the Reese social anyway. Side note, that's how my brain works. So of those 4, back on track. Of those 4, what is one thing each of you are like, this is what I'm doing well right now? And what is one that you're like, this is something that I want to work on, or I am working on?
Mm-hmm.
Way to ask good questions, Mackenzie.
I know. It's like it's her job to do it
My
here.
I know.
Okay, I have mine. Or do you want to go first, Courtney? You're like, not that.
I want to hear what you have to say first.
Okay. So one that I'm like, yeah, we're doing that. So the environments, right? So my description says like safe, stable places to live, learn, and play. So I will say like that. I feel like that's going well. But I also want to acknowledge that it's not necessarily like, I mean, obviously I have a role in that as their parent, but there's also like a level of privilege. Like I didn't have to fight very hard for that. I would say that's mostly the way I grew up and that my like co-parent grew up. And so providing like a safe, honestly, I would say sometimes I take it for granted
Sure.
that we're able to provide that to our kids. So yeah, so that safe, stable environment for our kids, I would say is there like we are all fortunate to have. And then one that I'm working on building, I think in part the age my kids are, is this idea of like engagement. So feeling like you matter to other people and the people in your community and figuring out what that looks like, right? So I'm hoping we're doing a like a good job as parents that they feel that within our family that they feel like they matter to us. But yeah, what does it look like in the bigger picture? How are we sprinkling in or helping them create relationships with other caring, consistent adults?
Right.
And I even think like in preparation for the teen years, if it does come to a place where my child doesn't, I mean, it's entirely possible my child just might not want to tell me something or might not want to talk to me about it. They're embarrassed or uncomfortable or like that's possible. And so I always think of that of like who are going to be the people they can go to. How do we help facilitate those relationships now? And so that's something I feel like I'm still working on.
Yeah. And
Me?
I was gonna say I should have specified, like, I'm not thinking like you have to have big, great ideas. It can be even like the smallest thing.
Okay. I went all the way in.
You're
Full
good.
send.
You're good. I
That's
just wanna like
okay. That's
I wasn't looking
honest.
for like, what thing are you, solving all the world's problems with? It's like your baby gate, right? You have a baby
Yeah,
gate.
we have a baby gate. All right, Courtney, what do you got? What do you got?
Okay, so I'll probably have like I want to say I have like two for each because my kids are so different in age
Mhm.
that they have to be different. So for my son who's 2, almost 3, I would say probably the development of social and emotional intelligence. So like interacting when it because I did just change daycares. I'm trying to get him more well-rounded when it comes to socialization because he is a handsy little boy.
Yeah.
Teaching that be nice, we don't hit our friends, we love our
Mhm.
friends, just so he gets that social interaction. And then the one thing I know that I'm doing good for him is making him feel that he's important, our engagement.
Mm. Yeah.
That's one thing I know that I will not fail at. He is my last baby. I love him so much.
Mhm.
Yay. Maybe I should.
Awesome.
And I think there could be like, hey, Courtney, you deserve a break. You don't need to engage with them all the time, too. So, I mean, you know what I mean? But then with Lexi, she just turned 13 over the last week. Was it last week? It was last week. So, of course, she's like now this just new woman. And she's like,
Coming of
okay.
age.
Yeah. So I think like the one thing I'm doing well with her is hmm.
I know you are. I know you're doing some good
I
stuff.
was gonna say, do you want us to answer for you?
I was say, do you need help? Because I do. I feel like I can help.
I think I'm providing her with a state. Man, I don't know. Maybe just the attachment with parents first and peers. I really try to hold that safe space for her. I
Mhm.
know there's stuff that she doesn't want to tell me, like Mackenzie was just saying. I know
Mhm.
that there's stuff that she's embarrassed to do and that she doesn't want to talk to me about, and that's okay.
Mhm.
The one thing I will say I overall am working on as like a family unit is our environment.
Sure.
I do have a very nice, stable, loving home,
Mhm.
but I'm just today going to go see about buying a home.
Woo!
So, so I would say that's what I'm working on as like on a family level versus
Yeah.
like this kid, that kid. All around is the environment. We live in a very beautiful, safe, suburbial like home, very
Mhm.
privileged community.
Mm.
But I think it's time, it's time. It's time for me to get my own home and provide my own little space, my own little comfort
Yeah.
bubble. So that's moving. That's a thing.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that, like, yes, you are providing a safe, stable environment currently, and like this next step for you will almost be like an upgrade in the safe,
Yeah,
stable environment? Yeah,
yeah.
like
We can always get
right now
better.
is great too, and like, yeah, not like upgrade. I don't know. You know what I mean?
It is upgrading. I haven't had my
Yeah.
own. I haven't had my own home for 13 years.
Yeah.
So this is big for me. So I think this is
Yeah.
gonna. I mean, I'm a work in progress.
Aren't we all?
Absolutely.
Aren't
Yeah.
we all?
Well, thank you both for sharing. And I know that maybe that was a tougher question than I intended it to be. I know, but I think the point was like it's it's okay. Like we're working on it, right? And we're aware. I think sometimes it's even like the awareness of like, oh, I want to be that. I want to work on that
Yeah.
is like an awesome step, right?
Mhm.
Awesome step.
Mhm.
Be like, okay, I have something going well. I want to work on something. That's
Mhm.
that's the first thing. So
Right? Or I even think also kind of the reverse of like, if you know there's a certain area of that because of whatever situation is going on, right? We talked about like the environment. There's like domestic violence in your home. Yeah, that whole like safe, stable environment isn't what that's gonna be. And
yeah.
acknowledging that is still really powerful as you're
Mhm.
like, okay, what do I do? Like, what do I do about that? I wish this wasn't happening. And right now, for whatever reason, I can't change that situation.
Sure.
Okay, I can look at one of these other things that will hopefully the research is telling us help counteract that
Yeah.
negative thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if your environment, so in this the sense that you're saying, Mackenzie, if your
Mhm.
environment isn't always stay safe and stable and like a super fun place to learn and live and play, at least you can have that in the relationship, hold true to that relationship with those kids. That's their safe spot. So again,
Yeah.
you being in their environment, your mom, like as a mom and a dad,
Mhm.
that's their environment. If your environment, if you're crazy and you're acting out and you're acknowledging all this, like, but at least you can provide that safe, calming space while they're in your arms or something. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like that's what I
Yes.
think is fair.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, and even, you've shared about when, like, being in active addiction, that maybe you weren't the parent that was providing the, like, consistency and the care and those things. And so, again, looking at those 4, being able to acknowledge that for yourself, and again, that does take, like, maturity and humility and those things, but being able to acknowledge it and recognize that, yeah, a different adult that might be able to provide consistency and care and or yes that they'll be in a different environment that is safe and stable in a way I'm not able to provide right now. And so
Yeah,
that those things are that's harm reduction, right? That's prioritizing the safety of our and well-being of our
for
children.
sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's
Those are
powerful.
our baby gates and our
Mhm.
parenting
Yeah.
strategies.
Those sorts of
Hmm.
things. Yeah.
We don't all have to have the same baby gates.
No, mine's wooden and a little rickety.
I'd like to think mine is like a beautiful aesthetic, and it's not. I know it's
The ones
not.
that are like drilled into the wall and have like little
Yeah.
stable
Like,
bars. Yeah,
Picture
no,
Eddie's
mine's
baby gates like just like, "Oh, it's the most beautiful thing." No, it's not
right.
meant to
They
be that.
are. We know
it's
what they
duct
are.
tape.
It's
Yeah,
meant
it's
to
duct tape.
be a safety feature. It's not meant to be like, "Oh, I have the most gorgeous." No.
Yeah. Okay, you actually wanna know what's ironic? We have 2 baby gates in our home right now, and one of them is, like, so broken, it can, like, fall out of the wall if you hit it wrong, which is okay because our children are, like, old enough, like, it's literally just, like, protection from someone, like, if they would trip right in front of the stairs. But so, if that tells anybody anything.
Liam broke every baby gate I've ever bought, so I just
Oh my
stopped
god.
buying them. Like
Oh.
he like I have my whole kitchen baby proof with like safety first, like
Mm.
ooh the cabinet. No,
Yes.
they're broken. They were broken before he was two, one and a half. He
That is funny.
No wonder
he's
you're talking about vigilance. You have to be vigilant.
girl.
Mhm. We can't rely on those things. We gotta be
Yes.
oh, funny.
Oh,
He's rough.
awesome. Well, that part's not awesome, but awesome conversation. Oh, thanks, Kens.
Alright. Yep. See you later.
See ya. Oh boy. So, yes, today talking all about how we can parent amid threats to safety and that, we do our best and that I hope, yeah, like I said, if you're a listener who has not had this kind of lived experience, you didn't grow up this way or, like no one in kind of your near surroundings has, I hope you maybe have learned a little something about the experiences of other parents and the difficult choices people are often forced to make when it comes to safety of themselves and their children. And so, we gave a lot of different kinds of examples and that our goal is really harm reduction. What are the things we can do to help protect our kids from negative consequences when we aren't living in a ideal situation or even a safe, let's just say, like, let's lower the bar from ideal, sometimes literally not living in a safe situation. And so that we can do harm reduction and that we can look at that hope framework for opportunities to help counteract the potential trauma that's happening. So that's kind of our summary. We also talked about some hotlines as resources again. We're going to link to the national hotlines page in our podcast episode description. But this brings us to a different thing, which is our positive affirmation of the day. And this one, I really tried to give a lot of thought to because I think this is really important. I think so often what society would define by the terms of like good and bad parenting, I think people who are parenting when it's like unsafe, like are automatically placed in this like bad parent category, which actually I'm like fighting the tears a little on that like people are doing the best they know how to protect their children. And so I thought the affirmation today was really important. If you are parenting in an unsafe situation, affirmation for today: even when I cannot control all of our circumstances, I can control the choices that I'm making to help keep my child safe. So whether or not they align with somebody else's choices, even when you can't control all the circumstances, I can control the choices I'm making to help keep my child safe. And that what your good enough parenting looks like for this like safety and well-being of your child. It's okay if it isn't a match to everybody else, but that you're prioritizing their safety and reducing potential harm is incredibly important. So that's our little affirmation for the day.
In our next episode, we will talk about family support, custody, and connections in an episode called When It Takes a Village.
Yes, we will. So thanks for joining us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. Don't forget that you can follow us along on social media at Science of Parents on Facebook and Twitter.
So come along with us as we tackle the ups and downs, the ins and outs, and research and reality all around the science of parenting.
The Science of Parenting is hosted by Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung, with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.
This project was supported by the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services, Bureau of Substance Use, via a subaward from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The contents of this episode are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official views of, nor are they an endorsement by, Iowa DHHS, SAMHSA, HHS, or the U.S. government.